The rifle shot echoed across the dusty plains of Wyoming territory, sending a flock of startled birds into the autumn sky as Wilhelmina Wright clutched the letter to her chest and sank to her knees beside the weathered Crossroads sign. The year was 1877, and the man who had promised to make her his wife was now 6 weeks late and nowhere to be found. Tears streamed down her face, cutting clean paths through the trail dust that had settled on her porcelain skin. 3 months ago, she had been a schoolteacher in Boston with respectable prospects. Now she was alone at an abandoned crossroads in the middle of nowhere, her trunk of belongings beside her, the stagecoach that had dropped her off long gone over the horizon. The second shot made her flinch. It was closer this time. Wilhelmina rose to her feet, gathering her skirts and looking frantically in every direction. The third shot was accompanied by the thunder of hoofbeats, and she saw him then a tall figure on horseback racing toward her, pursued by 2 riders who were firing wildly in his direction. "Get down, madam," the man shouted as he approached, his voice deep and urgent. Without hesitation, Wilhelmina dropped to the ground, pressing herself into the dirt beside her trunk. The rider vaulted from his horse and positioned himself between her and the approaching danger, drawing his revolver in one fluid motion. 2 more shots cracked through the air. One of the pursuing riders jerked backward, tumbling from his saddle. The other reined in hard, wheeling his mount around and galloping back the way he had come. "Are you hurt?" the man asked, turning to her, holstering his weapon. His face was partially obscured by a bandana, which he now pulled down to reveal a strong jawline darkened by several days' growth of beard. His eyes were the deep blue of a mountain lake, and they regarded her with concern. "No," Wilhelmina whispered, rising unsteadily to her feet. "No, I'm not hurt, just frightened." "Name's Henry Quinn," he said, removing his hat and revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat. "Most folks call me Hank. You shouldn't be out here alone, miss. These parts ain't safe for a woman by herself." "I'm waiting for someone," she replied, brushing the dust from her traveling dress. "My fiancé, Frederick Caldwell. He was supposed to meet me here 6 weeks ago." Something flickered in Henry Quinn's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or concern. He looked away, scanning the horizon. "Caldwell, you say?" "From over Double Creek way," Wilhelmina nodded eagerly. "Yes, do you know him? Have you seen him?" Henry Quinn replaced his hat, his expression carefully neutral. "I might have heard the name. Look, Miss Wright, Wilhelmina Wright." "Miss Wright, night's coming on fast, and those fellas might come back with friends. I've got a place about 3 miles west of here. Nothing fancy, but it's safe. I can bring you back here tomorrow if you're set on waiting." Wilhelmina looked at the darkening sky, then at the empty crossroads. 6 weeks of waiting had yielded nothing. What difference would one night make? "All right, Mr. Quinn, I accept your offer." Henry loaded her trunk onto his horse and helped her up behind him. As they rode away from the crossroads, Wilhelmina couldn't help but feel she was leaving something behind, not just a meeting place, but perhaps the last vestiges of a dream that had brought her halfway across the country. Henry Quinn's place turned out to be a modest but well-built cabin set against the foothills, with a small corral for horses and a barn. A stream ran nearby, and the setting sun bathed everything in golden light. "It's lovely," Wilhelmina said as he helped her down from the horse. "It's home," Henry replied simply. "Been working it for 5 years now. Got a small herd enough to get by." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly neat for a bachelor's dwelling. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and the furniture, though sparse, was solid and well-crafted. Henry built a fire and set about preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and coffee. "Tell me about Frederick Caldwell," he said as they ate, seated at a rough-hewn table. "How'd you come to be engaged to a man all the way out here?" Wilhelmina explained how she had answered an advertisement in a Boston newspaper, a rancher seeking a bride, promising a good life in the West. They had corresponded for 6 months before she agreed to come west and marry him. "Said he had a fine spread," she continued. 200 acres, a proper house with glass windows. Said he'd send someone to meet me at the crossroads or come himself. She looked down at her plate. That was the last I heard from him. Henry Quinn's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped his coffee cup. Miss Wright, I don't know how to tell you this, but Frederick Caldwell isn't who you think he is. What do you mean? Wilhelmina felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. Caldwell's been running a scheme for years. He places those advertisements in papers back east, convinces women to sell everything and come west. Then he either doesn't show or he meets them, takes whatever money and valuables they have and disappears. The blood drained from Wilhelmina's face. No, that can't be true. We wrote for months. He seemed so genuine. Henry's expression softened. I'm sorry, I truly am, but Caldwell isn't coming for you, Miss Wright. He never was. Wilhelmina stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. You're lying. Why would you say such a thing? You don't even know him. I know him well enough, Henry replied quietly. The man you were shooting at today, that was Frederick Caldwell. The revelation struck her like a physical blow. Wilhelmina backed away from the table, shaking her head. No, it can't be. I've been tracking him for months, Henry explained. Today I finally caught up to him. He recognized me and ran. That's when I saw you at the crossroads. Wilhelmina felt her legs give way beneath her. Henry was at her side instantly, guiding her to a chair. Why were you tracking him? She whispered. Henry's jaw tightened. My sister answered one of his advertisements 2 years ago. He took everything she had, our parents' inheritance, her savings, even her wedding ring. Left her with nothing but shame. She took her own life 6 months later. Tears welled in Wilhelmina's eyes, not for herself now, but for this man and the sister he had lost. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, Henry said, his voice gentle. But now you know why I can't let him get away with it anymore. He's hurt too many women, destroyed too many lives. That night, Wilhelmina lay on Henry's bed while he slept on a pallet by the fire. Sleep eluded her as she stared at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the Frederick Caldwell of her letters charming, articulate, promising with the man Henry Quinn had described. Had she been so desperate to escape her life in Boston that she had been willfully blind to the warning signs? The inconsistencies in his letters, the vague descriptions of his ranch, the urgency with which he had encouraged her to sell everything and come west. Morning brought clarity, if not comfort. Over breakfast, Wilhelmina made her decision. I want to help you catch him. Henry looked up from his coffee, surprised. That's not necessary, Miss Wright. This isn't your fight. He made it my fight when he lured me here under false pretenses, she replied with newfound resolve. Besides, I have nowhere else to go. I sold my parents' house, resigned my teaching position. Everything I owned is in that trunk, and most of that is clothing unsuitable for the West. Henry studied her for a long moment. It could be dangerous. Life is dangerous, Mr. Quinn. I've learned that much already. A reluctant smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. All right then, but we do this my way and you follow my instructions to the letter. Caldwell is not a man to be underestimated. Over the next week, Wilhelmina settled into life at Henry's cabin. He taught her to ride properly, not side saddle as she had learned in Boston, but astride a gentle mare he called Penny. He showed her how to shoot his Winchester rifle, and though she was a poor shot at first, she improved quickly under his patient instruction. They devised a plan to draw Caldwell out. Wilhelmina would return to the crossroads, playing the part of the abandoned bride still waiting for her groom. Henry would watch from a hidden position, ready to intervene when Caldwell inevitably returned to check if another victim had arrived to replace the one he had lost. He'll come back, Henry assured her. He always does. He can't resist the opportunity to fleece another innocent woman. As they worked together, Wilhelmina found herself increasingly drawn to Henry Quinn. Unlike Frederick Caldwell, whose charm had existed only on paper, Henry was genuine, straightforward, honest, and kind beneath his weathered exterior. She saw it in the gentle way he handled his horses, the respect with which he treated her opinions, and the quiet determination with which he pursued justice for his sister. One evening, as they sat on the cabin porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Wilhelmina asked the question that had been on her mind. "What will you do with Caldwell when you catch him?" Henry's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "Turn him over to the territorial marshal. There's a reward for his capture, not much, but enough to make a difference, and more importantly, he'll face justice for what he's done." "And after," she pressed. "What will you do then?" He turned to look at her, his expression softening. "Haven't thought that far ahead. Been chasing Caldwell for so long, it's hard to imagine life without that purpose." Wilhelmina nodded, understanding more than she cared to admit. She too had defined her life by a singular purpose, first her teaching career, then her engagement to Frederick Caldwell. Now both were gone, leaving her adrift in an unfamiliar world. "What about you?" Henry asked. "Once this is over, where will you go?" It was a question she had been avoiding. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have an aunt in Philadelphia who might take me in, but the thought of returning east as a failure." "You're not a failure," Henry interrupted, his voice firm. "Caldwell's the failure as a man, as a human being. You're just someone who took a chance on a better life." Wilhelmina felt a warmth spreading through her chest at his words. "Thank you, Henry. That means more than you know." 3 days later, they put their plan into action. Wilhelmina returned to the crossroads wearing her best dress, her trunk beside her, playing the part of the waiting bride. Henry concealed himself behind a rocky outcropping several hundred yards away, his rifle at the ready. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. The autumn sun beat down on Wilhelmina's parasol, and dust from the occasional passing wagon coated her skin. She began to wonder if their plan would work at all, if perhaps Caldwell had moved on to another territory, another scheme. Just as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, a rider appeared on the horizon. Wilhelmina's heart hammered in her chest as the figure drew closer. She could make out a well-dressed man on a handsome bay horse, his appearance every inch the prosperous rancher Frederick Caldwell had claimed to be. "Miss Wright?" he called as he approached, his voice smooth as honey. "Wilhelmina Wright," she nodded, forcing a smile to her lips. "Mr. Caldwell." He dismounted gracefully, removing his hat to reveal dark hair and a carefully trimmed beard. His smile was dazzling, his eyes warm with apparent concern. "My dear Miss Wright, I cannot begin to express my apologies for the confusion. I sent a man to meet you weeks ago. He must have failed in his duty." "How long have you been waiting here?" "6 weeks, Mr. Caldwell," she replied, watching his face carefully for any sign of deception. "6 weeks?" he exclaimed, taking her hands in his. "You poor dear. Such loyalty, such patience. It only confirms what I knew from your letters, that you are the perfect woman to be my wife." Wilhelmina felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. This man was good, convincingly good. Had Henry not warned her, she would have believed every word, every gesture of concern. "I've brought a wagon," Caldwell continued, gesturing over his shoulder. "It's just over that rise. We can load your trunk and be at the ranch before nightfall. I've prepared a special dinner to welcome you." "That sounds lovely," Wilhelmina replied, squeezing his hands. "I'm so relieved you've come at last. I was beginning to lose hope." Caldwell's smile widened. "Never lose hope, my dear. Now I'll just fetch the wagon. Wait here." As he turned to remount his horse, a voice rang out from behind the rocks. "That's far enough, Caldwell." Henry Quinn emerged, rifle aimed steadily at Caldwell's chest. The charm vanished from Caldwell's face, replaced by cold calculation. "Quinn," he spat. "Still playing lawman, I see." "It's over, Caldwell," Henry replied, advancing slowly. "The territorial marshal is on his way. You won't hurt any more women." Caldwell's hand moved toward his coat, but Wilhelmina was faster. She drew the small derringer Henry had given her from her pocket and aimed it squarely at Caldwell's chest. "Don't," she warned, her voice steady despite her racing heart. For a moment, Caldwell looked as though he might risk it anyway. Then, seeing the determination in both their faces, he raised his hands in surrender. "You're making a mistake, Miss Wright," he said, his voice now hard and cold. Quinn here is no better than me, just a failed rancher with a vendetta." "The difference is," Wilhelmina replied, "Henry Quinn is a man of honor, something you wouldn't understand." The territorial marshal arrived an hour later, accompanied by 2 deputies. They took Caldwell into custody, and Henry gave his statement, presenting evidence of Caldwell's scheme that he had collected over months of tracking the man. "You did good work here, Quinn," the marshal said, clapping Henry on the shoulder. "There's a dozen women across 3 territories who'll rest easier knowing this snake is behind bars." As they watched the lawman ride away with their prisoner, Wilhelmina felt a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. Their shared purpose was fulfilled. What came next? Henry seemed to sense her thoughts. "It's getting late," he said, offering her a hand up onto his horse. "Let's head back to the cabin. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." The ride back was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the cabin, Henry built a fire while Wilhelmina prepared a simple supper. They ate in comfortable silence, the weight of the day's events settling around them. "I've been thinking," Henry said finally, setting down his fork, "about what comes next." Wilhelmina looked up, her heart skipping a beat. "Oh, there's a small town about 20 miles south of here, Silver Creek. They're looking for a schoolteacher, the last one left to get married last spring." "A schoolteacher," Wilhelmina repeated, surprised. "How do you know?" Henry's cheeks colored slightly. "I rode down there yesterday while you were practicing with the rifle. Thought it might be an option for you, if you wanted to stay in these parts, that is." The implication hung in the air between them. Wilhelmina studied his face, seeing beneath the weathered exterior to the good man she had come to know over these past weeks. "Is that what you want, Henry, for me to stay in these parts?" He met her gaze steadily. "Yes, madam, it is." "I know it's sudden and maybe improper, considering how we met and all, but these weeks with you here—" "Well, this cabin hasn't felt like a home in a long time, not since my sister died, but with you here it does." Wilhelmina felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I came west to marry a man I'd never met. Seems I might do that after all, just not the man I expected." Hope dawned in Henry's eyes. "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe," she replied with a smile. "A strong maybe. I'd like to see this town, meet the people. And I'd like us to court properly, Henry Quinn. I made one impulsive decision that nearly ruined me. I won't make another." "Fair enough," he agreed, reaching across the table to take her hand. "We've got time, and I'm not going anywhere." The next day they rode to Silver Creek together. The town was small but thriving, a main street lined with businesses, a church with a proud white steeple, and a schoolhouse at the edge of town. The mayor, a portly man named Simmons, was delighted to meet Wilhelmina and offered her the teaching position on the spot. "We've got 15 children of school age," he explained, "and more coming up. Pays not much, but there's a small house behind the school that comes with the position. You'd be doing us a great service, Miss Wright." Wilhelmina accepted conditionally, pending a proper courtship with Henry. Mayor Simmons beamed his approval. "Quinn's a good man. Helped us out during the hard winter 2 years back, brought cattle down from his place to feed half the town when the supply wagons couldn't get through." Over the next 3 months, Henry courted Wilhelmina properly. They attended church in Silver Creek on Sundays, had dinner with the mayor and his wife, and spent long evenings talking on the porch of the schoolhouse where Wilhelmina now lived and taught. He brought her wildflowers, carved her a beautiful jewelry box from pine wood, and taught her to dance under the stars to no music but the wind in the grass and the distant howl of coyotes. In turn, Wilhelmina brought life and warmth back into Henry's world. She hung curtains in his cabin windows, planted a small vegetable garden behind the house, and filled his bookshelves with volumes ordered from Denver. She read to him in the evenings poetry and adventure stories, and slowly, the shadows of grief and vengeance lifted from his eyes. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, Henry proposed properly with a small diamond ring he had purchased in Denver. "I love you, Wilhelmina Wright," he said, kneeling before her in front of the fireplace. You came west looking for a new life, and in finding you, I found mine again too. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy streamed down Wilhelmina's face as she accepted. "Yes, Henry Quinn, yes, with all my heart." They were married on New Year's Day, 1878, in the Silver Creek Church, with the entire town in attendance. Mayor Simmons officiated, his wife played the organ, and the schoolchildren formed an honor guard with flowers as the newlyweds exited the church. Henry had surprised Wilhelmina by using the reward money from Caldwell's capture to purchase the adjacent property to his ranch. "Room to grow," he explained as they rode out to see it the day after their wedding. "For cattle, for crops, for family." Wilhelmina blushed at his meaning, but her heart soared at the thought. A family of their own, born of love rather than deception. A true home in this wild, beautiful country. Spring brought new calves to their expanding herd. Summer saw the completion of additions to the cabin, a proper kitchen, a second bedroom, and by autumn, Wilhelmina had news of her own to share. "A baby," Henry whispered, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby." "In April," she confirmed, laughing at the wonder in his eyes. Just in time for the spring roundup. Henry lifted her into his arms and spun her around, his joy uncontainable. "I love you, Wilhelmina Quinn," he said, setting her carefully back on her feet. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you, Henry Quinn," she replied, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. "The man who found me at the crossroads and showed me the true path home." Word came the following month that Frederick Caldwell had been sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. Several of his other victims had come forward to testify against him, ensuring he would not harm another woman for many years to come. "Justice," Henry said simply when he heard the news. "For all of them, for my sister, and for you, though you escaped his trap." "I found something better," Wilhelmina replied, taking his hand and placing it on her growing belly. "I found truth and love and a future brighter than any false promise could have offered." Their daughter was born on a bright April morning in 1879, Sarah Quinn, named for Henry's sister. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. As Wilhelmina watched Henry cradle their newborn daughter with awe and tenderness, she thought back to that dusty crossroads where she had waited, abandoned and alone. What had seemed like the end of her dreams had been merely the beginning of a journey she could never have imagined. The path had been unexpected, fraught with danger and deception, but it had led her here to a man of honor and integrity, to a home built on truth and love, to a life richer and more fulfilling than anything Frederick Caldwell could have falsely promised. As the years passed, their family and ranch prospered. Wilhelmina continued to teach until their second child was born and then devoted herself to raising their growing family. Henry's cattle business flourished, and they built a proper house on the expanded property. They had 3 more children, 2 boys and another girl, and adopted a young orphan whose parents had died on the journey west. Sometimes, travelers would pass by their ranch, and Henry and Wilhelmina would offer them shelter and a hot meal, particularly young women traveling alone. They would share their story as a warning and as a testament to the unexpected ways life could unfold in this vast, untamed country. On their 20th anniversary, Henry took Wilhelmina back to the crossroads where they had met. A proper town had grown up around it now, with a general store, a post office, and a small hotel. But the crossroads sign still stood, weathered but legible. "I almost rode past you that day," Henry admitted as they sat on their horses, looking at the spot where it had all begun. "I was so focused on Caldwell, I nearly missed seeing you there. One decision, one moment, changed everything." Wilhelmina reached across to take his hand. "You say that like it was chance, Henry Quinn, but I think it was more than that. I think we were meant to find each other, even if the path that brought us together was not what either of us expected." Henry squeezed her hand, his eyes reflecting the same love that had sustained them through 2 decades of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. "You might be right, Mrs. Quinn. After all, I took your path that day, and I never did leave it. And I'm eternally grateful that you didn't, Wilhelmina replied, leaning over to kiss her husband beneath the open sky where their story had begun. They rode home together as the sun set over the Wyoming plains. Back to the ranch and family, they had built together a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with grand gestures or perfect plans, but with an unexpected meeting at a dusty crossroads in the vastness of the American West.